Hey guys, in this video we're going to be discussing what are called the fulcrum stress points of the spine. Why is it that so many people end up having disc issues in specific parts of the spine? So C5 in the middle part of the neck, T2 in the upper part of the back, T7 in the middle part of the back, and then L3 and then L5 in the low back. But the two typical, most common ones, hands down, are going to be C5 in the middle part of the neck and L5 in the middle or the lowest part of your low back.
So why is it that most of us, when we herniate or compress a disc, it's in the middle part of our neck, C4, C5 region of your neck? Why is it that many of us, when we herniate or bulge a disc in our low back, it's like one of two spots down there, right in the center of your low back at L3 or right at the bottom down by your tailbone at like L5S1? And honestly, what it is it has a lot to do with how we develop as humans. So when we start developing in the womb, you end up with your nervous system, your spinal cord. You have a primitive notochord is one of the first things that actually starts to develop. And then growing around that, you have all of your spinal bones for protection. So as we age, if our spine develops properly, the first thing we end up developing right here, when we go from laying on our stomachs to spending belly time to then crawling to then kind of like, I guess, monkey crawling, which my son has been doing recently, to standing upright, what ends up happening is we start developing our neck curve first, right? And then when we start crawling, we begin to develop our low back curve, and it's because of how gravity compresses. And then as we're walking upright, we fall like 5,000 times by the age of 5 learning how to walk, but that's when we finish developing our low back and our neck curves. So naturally, gravity never takes a day off, and gravity is always compressing downward, right? So because gravity is compressing downward, our body has different stress points, is what they're called. They're called fulcrum stress points that are naturally taking on the greatest amount of compressive load. And that has a lot to do with our spinal curve structure, whether it's the right structure or the wrong structure. At the end of the day, it's still the same fulcrum stress points in your spine that are going to take on most of that weight-bearing load. And so typically in the middle part of your neck right here at C5, middle part of your mid-back or your hunchback between your shoulder blade region at T7, middle part of your low back at L3, and then right at the top of your tailbone, L5 region right here. This is a side view of the tailbone, and then a front view would be right here. Those are the areas that take on the greatest compressive stress load. And naturally, because of that, when I'm making recommendations for you for, let's say, taking some stress off of that disc or taking stress off of this disc, a lot of it is going to come from the absolute best thing we could do is have x-rays, because the x-rays are going to show us the underlying structure and how your body's loading those spinal joints, which is part of the reason why I ask you for those. And we can review them virtual and then couple that with doing a front on and a side view postural analysis with a 3D augmented measurement system. Now, the reason why I'm going to end up giving you specific types of isometric muscle holds and then stretch combinations, so stretch strengthen muscle work, is very simply because it's all reverse engineered from which muscles actually support each of these fulcrum stress points in your spine, and then which ones reinforce pivot areas in your spine. So a pivot area is, keep scrolling all the way down here. Let me show you this. So a pivot area is going to be like, if you imagine you take your spinal structure right here, right? And we start drawing these tangent lines and then showing the multiple stress points. Again, here from the side view is the middle part of your neck, middle part of your mid back, middle part of your low back, and then right above your tailbone. So there's 4 primary areas. Now, if we take the spine away from all of that, when you're looking at the back view right here, this is kind of what it would look like. Is imagine you have cones, and the cones or the triangles kind of like meet at points, and those triangles meeting at points are where the pivot areas are, where the fulcrum stress areas are. So from a front view, if I'm bending my head to the side, the middle part of my neck now takes on the greatest amount of stress. The same thing if I'm bending my chest. The middle part of my back right here is going to take on the greatest amount of stress for whatever bone joint that is. When I bend my low back and I hinge to the sides there, that's going to take on the greatest amount of stress. And then if I bend all the way to the side and pivot down at the hips, that L5 area takes on the greatest amount of stress. So naturally, that's just how it is from the front view. Now, if I make that where I lose the curve in my neck, I lose the curve in my mid-back, I start changing some of the bony structure of the biomechanics, those areas are already taking on a greater amount of stress, and now I'm compressing them even more, then obviously it makes sense that at that point those areas would buckle and become weaker. So anyway, I hope that this helps. This is just a little visual to show you fulcrum stress points in your spine and which areas of your spine typically take on the greatest amount of compressive load. Here's an example of, again, bending to the side where the triangles meet are going to take on the greatest amount of stress. Again, where the triangles meet, greatest amount of stress, and then in between the triangles for like twisting and rotation. So anyway, when we scroll back up, recommendations are all going to be reverse engineered based on the science of how our body has fulcrum stress points and where those fulcrum stress points have muscles attaching to support those areas. So when we give you recommendations for stretch, strength, and combo, it might feel like you're not doing a whole lot, but remember, the why behind the what is what drives the what and ultimately the how we go about correcting these problems. So it might feel silly, but do them, because all they're going to do is help you in the long run, and discipline is what gives us rewards at the end. So look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.